Back on the conversation. Is the internet an addiction? What are we going to do about it? Well, let's talk it through that and many more interesting topics with William Halal, PhD. He's actually Professor Emeritus of Management, Technology, and Innovation at George Washington University and the author of Beyond Knowledge. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Cenk.
All right. Let me start in a funny way. Beyond knowledge. Okay, I'll be your Huckleberry. What's beyond knowledge?
Well, we're living beyond knowledge now because this post-factual phenomenon that we've seen for a few years now, caused by social media, is post-factual. It doesn't count on, it transcends knowledge and logic and data. It's based on beliefs and values. So that is subjective consciousness, and it's paralyzed our government in many ways. So I think we are living beyond knowledge now. We're living in an age where values and beliefs transcend knowledge.
All right, help me and the audience understand that a little bit. What do you mean by subjective consciousness, and what do you mean that they have transcended facts and logic?
Well, values and beliefs dominate logic. People choose their beliefs, and then they find the data, the knowledge to support their beliefs. I think that's pretty well established, and that's what's fascinating about what's happening now. We've transcended knowledge. Knowledge doesn't seem to make much importance right now because the values and beliefs are wrong, and so we're caught in this conflict between stark differences in consciousness.
So that's true, of course. Funny enough, the right wing would not acknowledge that because they don't acknowledge facts. So they would say, no, 99% of the world's scientists are wrong. They're wrong about climate change. They're wrong about vaccines. They're wrong about coronavirus. And we have facts from 1%. And since our values and beliefs are more important than your stupid facts, we'll just cherry pick. We'll just cherry pick these facts, so-called facts.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly, right? That's exactly the logic.
Yeah.
And that's where we are. And it's a result of the digital revolution. The digital revolution has automated knowledge, so we've been forced to move up the hierarchy of consciousness from the objective stuff, not knowledge and facts and data, into the subjective realm of values and beliefs and vision and that sort of thing. And that's where the country is operating now.
But Bill, so why was it the internet age that led to that? Why didn't we have that, in the old days when we had traditional media?
Well, we didn't have social media. Social media is the big change, I think, and automation. We're automating the routine stuff, and so we're being moved up the value chain, so to speak, into the more subjective realm. And I mean, why is this? This is unusual. It's so strange. It's happening around the world, where people's conversations are unhinged from what is commonly understood to be reality, and so it's a very difficult, very dangerous state that the world is in, really, and we have to find a way to control what is a monster. Social media has become a monster.
But why do you think? I mean, if we're going to control it, we have to know what the underlying issue is, because you can't just stop social media. So presumably, you would have to fix something that's wrong, almost literally in the coding, right? So what is it, and how do we fix it?
Well, I think we have to just regulate this. There are a number of things we have to do. One is, I think it has to be regulated like any public utility, and that could be done by government, say, requiring companies to have a board, which is what Facebook does. They have a board that supervises their content. That's a good way to do it. They could measure the amount of disinformation on these different sites. They could penalize people who send flagrantly wrong information on the internet. We could use AI to spot information that is promotes violence or that is flagrantly wrong, and alert people to that. The biggest need, I think, though, we learned from studies we've done, is that we have to really get this into the educational system. It has to start with teaching young people how to discriminate between honest information and inaccurate information. And that's hard to do today. So they have to be educated to do that. And we need a culture that prizes truth telling. which is not the case now. That has been damaged. That principle in our country, at least, has been damaged in the last few years, I think.
So you talk about internet addiction, and the World Health Organization has called it a mental disorder. Okay, but all companies try to addict people to their product in some ways, like McDonald's wants you addicted to Quarter Pounder and cheeses. So Facebook, of course, wants you addicted to Facebook because that's their product. So should we stop that, and how do we stop that?
Well, that's one thing, advertising, but there have to be limits placed on it because it's intolerable. You can't run a society this way when there's this enormous confusion and distrust of the media and threats, violence. So all societies have to control their information to some degree. And we have done that in the past. We used to have a fairness doctrine in TV. So that we do that, and we just have to do a better job of it. But mainly, we have to develop a culture that prizes truth and knowledge, I think. And leaders have to show the way. We have to educate young people in how to do that. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a tough haul, but I don't see any option because it's out of control.
So I'm wondering if there's a positive side of this, because you talk about the age of consciousness, and that sounds good. So what's the age of consciousness, and how does it relate to this?
Well, that's what we're in. That's what I'm saying, Cenk. We are operating on the level of consciousness now with all of the post-factual stuff. That is, I think it's by definition, it's beyond knowledge. We're operating at that level now, and we have to understand that. And if we do understand it, then I think we can see our way through it. And one of the most important things to recognize is that this is a change in social evolution. We've moved out of the knowledge age that we've been in for the last 20 years. We've been operating in the knowledge age where knowledge dominates everything. That's no longer the case. We're now operating beyond that in consciousness, an age of consciousness. And if this is true, and I think it is true, every stage in social evolution has been driven by a revolution. I think we're likely to see what I call a mental or spiritual revolution in maybe a decade or two towards a global consciousness. It's the only way that people think today that we can have a sustainable world. The world as we know it today is not sustainable. You can ask people on the street and they will agree with that. So we have to have a dramatic change in thinking. And it's something like a global consciousness.
All right, I want to come back.
I know that, Jack. That asks a lot, but I think those are the facts.
Okay, I want to come back to what that means in a second, but let me see if I understand this right. When you talk about consciousness, I usually view that as a positive thing, but in this case, you're saying, well, it's problematic because we're getting past knowledge. And so I would frame that a little bit differently. I think the world, and specifically humans, run on stories. And what some bad faith actors have done is that they've kind of tapped into the storytelling and what you're calling consciousness, and directed people away from facts and logic and directed them to fear and anger and their emotions. And humans have a lot of emotions, and that affects us, and they know that. So they tell a different story, and they've gotten people to believe that story. Does that sound right?
Yes, that's exactly true. That is consciousness. That's values, beliefs, stories. Yeah, that's all consciousness. It's subjective. People differ in their subjective consciousness. And I want to make an important point, Cenk. Consciousness is not always good. It includes everything. Just like information includes bad information. So consciousness can include terrible forms of beliefs and outrageous lies. It can include hate. It include everything.
Yeah, now
that's what makes this such a challenge.
Yeah, and Bill, so I get it, because I think that there's this battle of stories, if you will, and hacking into the main storyline of logic and progress and reason was inevitable, because people are going to want to do that for their own private gain, because humans are selfish. And then you will get into, we had information warfare, now we have, in a sense, consciousness warfare. And so now that it's begun, you're saying the solution is global consciousness. Now help me understand that. What does that mean?
We don't know really. There are a lot of people who are trying to define it. We have defined it at my company in terms of 5 principles, but there's a growing interest in this. I hear the term everywhere, Jake, global consciousness, and that is the challenge, to define it as a vision that we have to work toward. The way a business defines a vision that it wants to accomplish for its company. We need a vision of where the world is going to resolve these terrible differences in consciousness.
Yeah, so now you're gonna freak the right wing out a lot, because it sounds they are gonna interpret that as New World Order. So no. You're gonna get us all to think the same things, they're gonna say, etc. So tell me how it's different than that.
Well, the Dalai Lama, for instance, has for many years been making a point that all religions revolve around a few basic principles. So that would be a place to start. The common principles that religions all advocate. And it could be anything, but we need a vision of a sustainable world or we're not going to get there. It's really that simple. The present mindset is not sustainable, and people know that. Everybody seems to understand that. The pandemic made it very clear. And so we have this enormous challenge of defining a vision of a sustainable world that people will agree on. And I know that is an enormous challenge, but it has to be general enough so everybody can buy into it. That's true. That's true.
Yeah, we can't have a global consciousness if we don't all agree. So almost by definition, you have to start it from scratch, and you have to say, can we all agree? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Okay, we got general agreement on that, and now let's start to build off of that, right?
Exactly, it's that kind of thing, or else it's just not going to work. We're just not going to have a civilization, really.
Right. All right, fascinating stuff. William Halal, the author of Beyond Knowledge. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jake. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.